And we are live. And I'm going to start this live by doing something that I never usually do, and that's apologize. You see, right now, you might be hearing a little bit of buzzing through this live, and that is not your imagination. Because right now, at this exact moment in time, outside my window is a leaf blowing convention. Perhaps the biggest leaf blowing convention in history. So I do apologize if you're hearing some unwanted sounds through this live, but nonetheless, the show must go on, and we've got a very interesting topic to go through today, which is how to tell stories that sell. How to tell stories that sell. If you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn, whether it be live or as a repeat, put a wee comment below. Let me know that you're out there. And of course, if you have any questions as we go through this live, put them in the comments too, and I will answer them live on here if you're watching right now, or I'll answer them later on if you're just watching the recording. And stories that sell. I think it's really important to understand why we want to tell a story in the first place, whether it be in a presentation or even in a conversation. You see, when we speak to someone for the first time, whether it be a prospect in a sales call or when we're speaking to an audience that don't know us, we want to go as quickly as possible from being a stranger to a friend. From a stranger to a friend. And the fastest way to do that is through telling a personal story. Ideally, a story about how we got doing what we're doing, how we got into our field of expertise, how we became the person we are today, especially if we want to sell. And it's interesting. I do quite a lot of sales calls every week where I'm talking to people one-to-one, and I'm, seeing if they want to get involved in my one-to-one public speaking coaching program. And I've found that if I tell one story in particular, I am far more likely to bring that client on board than if I don't. If I don't tell the story, I'm far more likely not to close that deal, and the client will walk away and we won't do business together. But if I tell the story, for whatever reason, things happen a lot faster and we tend to close the deal. So what I want to do now is actually share this story with you. And then afterwards, we're going to break down why that story works and how you can tell a similar story so that you can close more sales or so that you can win over your audience in a presentation. I tell this story on stages to audiences, but also in one-to-one calls. And it's all about how I got into the world of public speaking and presenting. This is what I say to people. I say to them, I got into public speaking because I was terrible at it. My first ever presentation that I remember was back in high school. Do you remember in English class how sometimes the teacher would ask you to stand up and read out loud a book that you were studying in class? We did this all the time in our school. And one year we were studying a book by Shakespeare, and it was my turn to read. So I stand up with the book in hand, and in hindsight, the book read to be or not to be. That is the question. But I'm a dyslexic. So I read out loud in front of the entire class, to pee or not to pee. That is the question. And as I'm sure you can imagine, my classmates were very supportive about that. But that planted an idea in my mind that when I stand up and speak, bad things happen. And that followed me all the way through school and all the way through university. Anytime I had a presentation, I would get up there and I'd freeze or I'd choke or I'd just say two words and sit back down. And then one day after another terrible presentation, another awful, embarrassing presentation, I just had enough. I just had enough of feeling fearful anytime I felt I had to express myself in front of others. So I realized I had to make a choice. I could either just keep doing what I was doing and struggle with presenting for the rest of my life, or I could do something about it. And what I decided to do was three things. Number one is I decided to learn the art of speaking. I decided to learn the skills, actually how to tell stories, structure presentations, use your body language, use your voice. Second is I found places to practice. I go along to Toastmaster clubs, for instance, and I would practice presentations there in front of others. And thirdly, I found people who were better than me, and I asked for their feedback. I'd ask them, how can I improve things? How can I get better at speaking? And they would give me guidance on how I could improve. And after doing that for about 6 months, I started to lose the fear and actually started to enjoy my speaking. Now, 8 years on from making that decision, I'm now a European champion of public speaking. I wrote up a 5-star book on the topic, as you can see behind me, and I have the great pleasure with my business, Confidence by Design, of helping thousands of people overcome their fear and become compelling speakers. And it all goes back to those 3 things. If you're willing to learn the skills, practice, and get feedback, then you can become good at speaking. You can become a confident public speaker. So when I tell people that little story in a one-to-one call or on stage in front of hundreds of people, the audience or the individual tends to be a lot more open and receptive to my ideas, and they tend to want to work with me afterwards. And I think it's because that story allows them to connect with me more. It shows them that I struggled with speaking as well, like they do, and therefore they feel there's a connection there. And it also gives them an idea of what I did to get through things and how they can potentially too. And this is something which you can replicate when telling a story on stage or in a one-to-one conversation. If you can tell a story like that, I can almost guarantee that you will be more persuasive towards clients. Clients will be more open to your ideas and they'll want to get involved with you. We've got Aisha, who's just left a comment there. Haha, it always happens. Don't worry. Yes, I think we've all been there with a bad situation in presentations before. So that being said, what I now want to do is really break down that story a little bit more and give you the 3 C's of compelling storytelling so you can begin to craft your own story in a similar way, perhaps. And the first thing that we need to talk about when creating any kind of story is, number 1, coming up on screen, conflict. Conflict. Your story that you tell to the audience or you tell to that one-to-one client has to have an element of conflict involved in it. If there's no issue, if there's no problem, if there's no obstacle for you to overcome, it's a boring story and no one's going to want to listen. So you have to have some conflict. My conflict was straight away to pee or not to pee, saying that in front of the class, sitting down in shame. That makes you wonder, okay, so how did Kyle evolve? How did he learn to get comfortable with speaking if that was his first experience? You need to say something similar early on in your story. Get people curious about how you overcame that challenge quickly. All right? Once you've done that, you can then move on to the second C, which is the crossroads moment. This is where you have to make a decision. You have to decide whether you are going to run away from that conflict and never face it, or if you're going to run towards it and find a way around it, over it, or beneath it, or whatever it may be. And talking about the moment where you made that decision is very relatable. Because if you're on, for instance, a one-to-one sales call, that client you're speaking to has to make that decision potentially right there and now. They can choose to run away from their conflict by not working with you, by not getting your help, or they can run towards it and try and improve things by working with you, by having your service. So for instance, if you are a will writer and this person is kind of going back and forth whether they want to get their will written or not, they'd be running away by not getting it done, and they'd be running towards that conflict by getting you to help them write that will. So describe your own crossroad moment, your own moment where you decided, you know what, I need to get my will done. And that can be very powerful for connecting with them and encouraging them to take action. third C, this is something which a lot of people neglect, is talking about the change. Talk about how things have improved as a result of you deciding to take a positive form of action in that crossroad moment. So I did this in my story. After I talked about those three things that I did of getting skills, practicing, and asking for feedback, I told you about how now I'm a European champion, wrote a book, da-da-da-da-da-da. I told you about all of the positive things and how much I'm enjoying my own speaking now. And you hearing that success encourages you to also think about how you could learn the skills more, how you could practice more, how you could get feedback from other people for your presentation so that you can have similar or even more success going forward. So talking about the change, how you have evolved as a character, as an individual, as a result of taking that action, that decision in the crossroad moment, can be a very powerful tool for persuading people why they should take this certain course of action, why they should get involved in your product or service or your way of thinking. You've got to show the benefits. Benefits sell, right? So we've got to talk about them by describing the change that we have personally experienced. So have a think about that, those three C's right there. You know, the conflict, the crossroads, and the change. If you have any questions, I'll be free to take them right now. The leaf blowing you were talking about, Aisha. It does happen. It does happen. Yes, if you have any questions on those three C's, the conflict, the crossroads, or the change in your story, I'd love to hear them right now. What I would just add briefly is that not everybody's, some people feel like they don't have a story like this they can tell. We all have a story that we can tell. We all have some form of experience, which if we share, our clients, our prospects, our audience will connect to. And what I would do is I would have a good think about your expertise and truly ask yourself, how did I get involved in this? You know, for instance, if you're a life coach, or if you're a manager or something like this, ask yourself, what led me down this path to getting to this place? If you're a life coach, I'm sure you had some form of life crisis that you had to face and you experienced, and that's your conflict. And then perhaps in the crossroad, you had to make a choice whether you continue just to meander through life and experience this crisis and not do anything about it, or of course, do something about it, whether it be through a form of coaching might be. I'm sure you had to make that choice. And then, of course, you can describe how things have improved as a result as well. A compelling story as okay. So right now we don't have any questions. If you do have a recording of this, please do your story. I can absolutely provide you with that training. The one-to-one coaching is very simple. It's all about working to your schedule with your specific are interested in improving your storytelling skills and maybe the structure of your presentation, your body language, we'll focus on those things, and then you can deliver presentations to me and I'll give you feedback. If it's a team situation, then we can literally create a program designed around your team's needs. So if your team are pitching all the time, we can do a program on pitching. And then they can get a chance to pitch to the room. And then I and the rest of the team can give that individual feedback so that they're feeling as confident as possible going into that pitch. So if you're interested in either of those things, just reach out to me on LinkedIn, on YouTube, wherever you may be watching this. But I hope you found this valuable today. I hope it stimulated some ideas for you about how you could potentially tell stories that sell. And I look forward to seeing you next week, where we'll dive into a brand new topic, which I think you'll find extremely interesting. I will see you in the next live. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend.